Now we'll get the bell. Now we'll have the bell. So, another episode of Coffee and Conversation with Holly. Can you give me the thumbs up to know that the microphone is working properly now? Thank you very much. Welcome to those that are online with the Zoom call, as well as those who have joined us on Facebook Live. We're very excited to welcome you again this morning. I'm just showing you an image. Are you seeing the shared screen, Holly? Is that coming up?
Yes.
Perfect. Like to just make sure everything's working properly. I just thought I'd show you again. These are shipping today. I'm so excited. We have 45 banners that we have had made by the district for all clubs to have a fresh new face to present to their communities as we start to do that. And so all 45 have been printed. There were a few edits from this sheet. So if you see yours there and think, oh, that's not exactly how it should have been, this will be updated as well, but they are shipping today. So they're heading for me, and we'll figure out how we're going to spread them around. But I'm very excited that all of these banners are on the way, and that this project has been one that clubs have embraced and given us their feedback on. So we're delighted to have that happen. And I wanted to show our special guest that this has happened, because we're trying to do what we can with our public image work as we navigate these unusual times. So we are going to start in just a moment with our conversation. So we'll remind everyone who is on Zoom to please select the speaker view in the upper right corner so that you can see the appropriate full screen. We're going to try something a little bit different as part of our introduction this morning, and Holly is going to pull up a poll in just a second as we get underway when I stop sharing this screen, just because a couple of reasons. One, we want to do something kind of fun for our introduction of our guest. Plus, we also are testing our polling functionality. We'll be using that at our AGM coming up in a week or so. And so this is an opportunity for us to do that. So I'm going to stop sharing now and see everybody that's on, and hopefully again get everybody to the speaker view. And Holly, I'm going to ask you to pull up that poll if we could, and we're going to just see a little bit about our guest if we can. So here's we're going to question 3 first. That's okay. We can do that in order.
Just hang on now. How did that?
So our guest this morning, as you know, is John Hewko, who is the CEO of Rotary International. Sometimes that position is called the General Secretary. And the first question that for you to vote on, and you'll see in a minute why this particular question is posed the way it is that before becoming CEO of RI, John worked as an international partner in a major law firm, or as an entertainer driving bicycles upside down. And John, you know why this is a significant question. So everybody can vote on that. This is your chance to make sure that this works and see if you know the right answer to this question. So submit your votes. Are you getting them, Holly?
Yep, just waiting for another 25% to vote.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen for a second while people do that. So there's the reason why we might have, I hope you're seeing that photograph now. It's a little bit fuzzy, but John, I don't know if you want to say anything about that at this point, but you can unmute yourself if you would like to comment on that particular photograph.
Well, thank you, Lisa. And first, good morning to everybody, and delighted to be here with you at this coffee and conversation. Yeah, no, I had, this was sort of at the tail end of March. We had gone into a work from home status like 3 weeks before that, and I had sent a series of serious videos to the Rotary International staff, and I thought I'd do a more lighthearted one about, yeah, we're all kind of cooped up and trying to find innovative ways to stay in shape. So, and I'm a cycling fanatic, so came up with hopefully a funny way.
It was great. I really enjoyed it. So I had to do a screen capture from that one. I'll stop sharing it now. Holly, let's do another question just so we learn a little bit more for real. I started with that one, but let's have the for real questions about okay. John, if we could.
So we'll share the results first.
Oh, look, now look, 50-50, John. I don't know what that says. We're I don't know what that means, but that's good. Okay, what's the next one, Holly? So this is good too. It's a test. So John, we're trying new things with Zoom every week to make sure that we're ready to use the functionality. So John is a charter member of the first Rotary Club of, and here are your choices, Cleveland, Kiev, Moscow, or Halifax. So vote on that one. So he is a Rotarian and he's a charter member. And I know you're all voting, and so I'm going to keep going, and Holly can give us the quick answer. We won't wait for everybody. Holly, are they getting it right? What do you think? They are 59%, and that's the correct answer. John is in fact a charter member of the first Rotary Club in Kyiv. So delighted to welcome him with that history, and we're going to have a special welcome for him in a moment, I think, as well. Third one, Holly. I think we only had 3 or 4, just to make sure we gave a little bit of a background. So this was I think this is the final one. So John has degrees from, so you have to pick. Would it be McGill and the Sorbonne, Harvard and Oxford, or Berkeley and Yale? What do you think? He's got multiple degrees, and a couple of them are from those places. John, you can vote too, because I think you know the right answer. And most people do. I don't know how they all know that. 74% got it right. It is correct. John has degrees in law and various other studies from Harvard and Oxford. So he's traveled a lot. He's had a very interesting background in international work. So I think we'll move along. And John, I'm not going to tell anything else about your background, but I'll open it to you to say, please let us know if there's anything else we should know about you before we get into our questions.
Oh, that's fine. Again, delighted to be here. And as you mentioned, I have the privilege of being your general secretary, and in that position, I oversee a professional Rotary staff of about 750. As you know, our world headquarters are here in Evanston, in Chicago, Illinois, and about 550 here in Chicago, and then we have 200 some employees in our 7 offices around the world. So delighted to be here, and thanks again for having me.
Well, thank you very much. Now, I know there is somebody on the call. I think, Valerie, if you are here, can you just unmute yourself for a moment and do the welcome that you wanted to do for John? If Valerie Bobick is on the call, just press your space bar, Valerie, and you can do that. Maybe she's not here. We'll come back to that in case she is. Well, John, I happened to be in Evanston just as you were starting the test of having folks work at home. I was finding myself in the basement of the building in Evanston in the archives doing a little bit of research work. I think it was the day before you did the first work at home test, and so folks were really looking into how that was going to work for them. And obviously that's now a couple of months ago, and people have been working very differently. Tell us a little bit about how a day in the life of John has changed from back before that time till now. What's happening in how you are managing those 500 plus people and keeping everything rolling at RI? Oh.
For me, it became pretty obvious back in January, sort of looking at events as they were unfolding in Asia, and then my daughter is doing her graduate work in Paris, and so I was on, obviously communicating with her as that wave started moving through Europe, and it became pretty obvious that this was going to become a worldwide phenomenon and a problem. So in January, we put together a COVID task force and really began planning for the eventuality of working from home, of sending the entire international operations to a virtual sort of reality. So we took the month of January and February to get ready, working on our IT systems, making sure we had, everybody was properly equipped. And as you said, Lisa, we did send everybody home worldwide for a day to sort of try out the system and work the kinks out. And I'm glad we did, because we did discover a number of things. And so on March 12th, we moved the entire Rotary International and Rotary Foundation operations to work at home in virtual status. And it's been fairly seamless. I think one of the things I'm very proud of is that we continue to support the Rotary world 100%. And very fortunate as an organization that we can do that. And the other thing was just employee health. One of my primary goals was to make sure that we're maximizing the health and safety of our employees, of our Rotarians, our senior leaders, the visitors to One Rotary Center. As you know, we own our building, 18-story building. It's the premier office building on the North Shore of Chicago. Rotary, we use half of it for our own purposes, and then we lease the other half out. So I've learned more about facilities management in this job than I probably cared to know about. And it was a very good investment for Rotary. So it was a complicated situation because we had tenants, we had our own And we've only had 8 of our colleagues in the Secretariat have tested positive for the virus, and all of them became symptomatic well after the 2-week period after we went to work at home status. So I'm very proud that we've both been able to move our operations seamlessly, and that we were able to do that while maximizing the health and safety of our employees. Obviously, life has changed dramatically for all of us. I think this coffee and conversation is a perfect example of that. I think, I'll get to it perhaps a little later in our conversation, Lisa, is I think that this is, in some ways, has been there's, of course, this is a terrible tragedy, no question about it. But for Rotary, I think there is a silver lining here. And for many years, we have been trying to urge clubs and districts to embrace flexibility, to embrace new ways of doing things, to be creative, to be innovative. And very often, necessity is the mother of innovation. And I think that this has forced the entire world, the Rotary world, to innovate, to change, to be creative. And so I think this is a great opportunity for us to take our organization to an even different level by beginning experimenting with new ways of doing things.
Oh, exactly. I think lots of people are referring to Churchill's quote that's attributed to him anyway about never wasting a good crisis,
Right.
and looking for that silver lining. So I think we're all maybe coming to grips with the idea that we're not going back to normal, whatever normal might be in anyone's world, that there will be a new normal. And so, as you say, this is a chance for us to change. So what are you imagining will be part of that new normal for Rotary?
Well, I think, obviously in the near future at least, and perhaps in the medium term future, we're not going to be meeting as often as we are in person. Certainly the Rotary International Board of Directors will be having all its meetings virtually through the end of this calendar year. The same for the Rotary Foundation trustees. All of our committee meetings, et cetera, are going to be done online. Our convention, we had to cancel our convention, which was going to be in Honolulu in June. And we're now moving to put together a virtual convention, which is, of course, I suspect not a whole lot of organizations in the world put on events as large as ours. And so we'll see how that goes. The record for an in-person convention was around 45,000 in Osaka. And we would love to be able to break that record this year with our virtual convention. And so I urge all of you to sign up for that. It's free. And by the way, for those of you who had signed up for the Honolulu convention, we were giving a full refund for the registration fees. Although you do have an option to direct those refunds to the COVID response fund, which the Rotary Foundation has set up. So there is an option to do that. So I see, I really see, in some ways, what's a big perhaps the question is always asked. What do you think is going to happen to our membership? Right, we're now in a crisis situation economically. A lot of many areas of the world are suffering. Many Rotarians are suffering with the loss of business, etc. And so what we did is we're very fortunate to have a PhD statistician on staff. And what I asked him to do was to take a look at the last 115 years of Rotary history, and see what has happened historically to Rotary in terms of our membership in all the great crises: World War I, the Spanish flu, the Depression, World War II, Great Depression of 08, 09, and what has happened to our membership, and then do some sophisticated mathematical modeling to see what we project our global membership to be like going forward. And again, this is at a global level, and it's going to vary from region to region and from country to country. And what we found was that there was only one time in our history in the last 115 years, and that was 2 years after the end of the Great Depression, when we had a significant drop in membership. That was 5%, a little over 5%. Since then, in all the great crises, other than that, in all the great crises that Rotary has lived through, the membership drop has been 2% or less. In fact, the latest crisis in 08, 09, we saw membership drop of about 0.5% in each of the 2 years in 08, 09. And so we have to remember that a 1% drop in membership represents about an $800,000 loss in revenue to Rotary International. So even if we were to have a 5% drop, which has only happened once in our history, that's about a $4 million loss in revenues. And Rotary International has very solid reserves. We have managed our finances through the years in a very prudent and fiscally responsible way. We have a reserve around almost $70 million for Rotary International, and a very healthy reserve for the Rotary Foundation as well. And so I'm very confident that as we speak today, not only operationally sound, we're continue to work as we were before. We continue to support Rotarians as we did before, but we're also financially very sound. And then looking forward, the modeling showed that we really don't anticipate with fair degree of high degree of probability that we're going to suffer a significant loss in membership. Again, the past is no guarantee of the future, but at least at this point, I'm fairly optimistic that we're in quite good shape to weather this storm.
Well, that's good to hear. We just recently did a full survey in our district and had over 500 people respond, which is an incredibly high response rate. It's more than a third of the people responded, which I guess says something about people being at home with time to do surveys. But it was a fairly low percentage. We did ask the question around people's intentions to renew. And it was a small percentage, which was encouraging, but we did get some great information and very valuable data. And I'm thrilled to hear that the statistician has been looking at that. That was in fact something that I was doing in the archives, was trying to get Canadian data all the way back to the very beginning. So I may need to connect with that statistician. So even before COVID happened, I know at the board level, there's a committee looking at the future of Rotary, and now there's also a COVID task force. And I think you were also looking operationally at ways to do things differently in alignment with that future of Rotary committee. Is there anything about that you can share with us?
Well, I think one of the trends that one of the sort of the concepts that we've been sort of focusing on quite a bit over the last few years is, again, this issue of club flexibility. You know, we have, let me be quite open with this group. We have a membership issue in North America. We've been flat worldwide, globally, as an organization at 1.2 million for the last 25 years. And that's largely because we're seeing significant membership growth in places such as Asia. However, we're seeing notable declines in Canada, the US, Australia, New Zealand, the UK. You know, North American Rotarians, for the first time in Rotary's history, have dropped below 30% of worldwide membership. Back in 1905, of course, it started at 100% by definition, and we're now below 30% at 29% and dropping. I think if current trends were to continue, it'll be below around 15 to 20% in the next 10 years. So we need to grow Rotary everywhere. And in my view, at least, in some ways, we are selling a product to the marketplace. We're not selling soap or bleach, but we are selling a club experience. The experience you get by joining a Rotary club, and you pay for that experience with your time and with your money. And we're finding in certain parts of the world, particularly in, let's say, in North America, people are either not buying our product, or when they buy it, they find it wasn't what it was cracked up to be. You know, last year globally, we had 150,000 people join Rotary. We had 150,000 people leave Rotary. So some ways we are facing almost a retention issue more than a recruitment issue. And so we've now, the Council on Legislation in 2016 gave clubs enormous flexibility now in terms of fashioning the product that you're offering to the marketplace, because the market is not going to change for us. We need to change for the marketplace and figure out what demographic, who are we trying to attract to Rotary, and then fashion a product that they're going to find attractive. You know, as I like to say, there is no Rotary police. For me, what's important, I mean, certain things can never change. The four-way test, our values, our ethics, is sort of the bedrock of our organization. But a weekly meeting is not a value. That's just a means of delivering our values. Some of the traditions we have are not values in and of themselves. They're just ways that we delivered on our value proposition. And so we were really working very hard to sort of encourage that sort of innovation, thinking out of the box, et cetera. And this crisis, what it has done is it's just really accelerated everything. You know, necessity is the mother of invention, and all of us now were forced almost overnight in a span of weeks to move to a whole different reality. So I'm very optimistic because I think that, for example, you know, obviously the fellowship, the in-person part of being a Rotarian is extraordinarily important. I think all of us can't wait till we get back to being able to do some of that. But on the other hand, this has given us an opportunity to really think differently, and we may actually attract more members or a new type of demographic. I know my daughter, she's 27. I mean, we got her out the last minute from France, and she's riding out this crisis with us, but she's continuing her studies online. It's no big deal for her. They live in this space. She's comfortable in this space. And so we maybe actually find ourselves more attractive to sort of a younger demographic that we struggle to attract because of this, our ability to adapt to this online format. So this I think has opened up an opportunity for us to really begin thinking out of the box. And I'd like, before we end, I'd like to have 5 calls to action to the group, and part of it revolves around this sort of need to be creative at this point. But I'm very optimistic. I think this is an opportunity for us, not a this is something we can really, I think, capitalize on.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I'm happy to hear you speak about things like what is our value proposition. In fact, that was a key part of our discussion that we had at a training session earlier this year, just before COVID, where we looked at using the business model canvas kind of tool to say, what is the value proposition and how can we make some shifts to increase that value? Not talking about values, but value proposition. Right. And so, certainly conversations have been happening around passport clubs and other kinds of models like that. But are you seeing any other sort of specific tangible things that clubs in North America are doing to be flexible, other than, I mean, obviously there's time and location and using technology, but any other really interesting sort of aha moment things that you've seen?
Well, again, I think these passport clubs, as an example, again, the challenge is it's really, Rotary begins and ends at the club level, and every community is different. Every club has its own personality, its own focus, and that's the beauty of Rotary. It's just extraordinary diversity in terms of, again, personalities of clubs, focus of clubs, et cetera. And so it really does boil down to what does work for you locally. And these passport clubs is an example of creativity that was very appealing at the time they were first set up in San Jose, in Silicon Valley. I suspect there's parts of the world where that would not be an attractive option. In fact, there's parts of the world where the traditional model is working extremely well. And by all means, carry on. It's whatever works. There was a club in Texas, I think Cross Timbers was the town. They pulled together, I don't know, a large group of community leaders in their town. And they had a whiteboard. And they did a whiteboard exercising with those people and said, okay, if you were to join a Rotary club, what sort of characteristics would that have? What would it look like? And they had a brainstorming session and, sketching. And then at the end of that session, the moderator said, okay, how many of you would join a club that had these characteristics? And just about everybody put their hand up. Well, they're not guessing. They know that's what the marketplace, at least that group of people, wanted. And I can guarantee you there's probably 20 rules violations in that structure that was up on the board. But in my view, that's not what it's all about. It's about creating vibrant, thriving clubs that are making a difference, that are appealing to the marketplace that we're trying to attract. Now, what we are doing at RI is trying to collate examples of some of this creativity, and then we've been highlighting in the Rotarian magazine new club models, new ways of doing things. But it's really a matter of doing what you're doing, Lisa. Do your strategic analysis, do your market survey, figure out what's going to be attractive, and then refine your product to meet market demands. In my view, the sky's the limit, and I think this has shown us. Right?
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree. And I'm really happy to hear you say that. And I know you were very supportive as I was trying some things differently this year. We've experimented with a number of things in this district this year. And you were very supportive right from the very beginning with some of the questions that I had around, what if we do it this way? What if we do it that way? And that the Rotary police weren't going to come after me. So that was really encouraging. And it's been interesting now to see how this COVID piece has changed it. One of the
also you got to experiment, and we will have failures, right? I mean, who was it? Wayne Gretzky said, "You miss 100% of the shots you don't take." We don't need 1,000 things to work. We just need a few. And I think if we can unleash the creativity of 1.2 million people, like for fundraising, I was just on a district-wide call in Ukraine, my home district, and one of the clubs there raised a boatload of money for the foundation, doing a virtual beer fest, virtual Oktoberfest, buying and selling beers virtually. And I guess somebody at the end of the day did get a case of beer delivered to their house. But in Ukraine, that works. That works. Yeah. I suspect there are parts of the world that wouldn't work. But again, this is really our opportunity to think creatively.
Absolutely. Nice segue to mention the Ukraine. Valerie, press your space bar there. I see you're there now, and you're all set to want to say something to John.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, вітаємо, пан Іван.
Oh, привіт, як все?
I'm sorry to have been late.
Valerie wanted to make sure that we let you know that we are truly a global district, and that we're actually in the same club. So she came all decked out this morning. We've even had Ukrainian dinners that she's hosted at New Year's. So
fantastic.
Thanks, Valerie.
Well, Ukraine, of course, Canada has a very strong Ukrainian community, particularly out west, as you know, and so Toronto as well, and yeah.
Not a bad-sized Ukrainian community here in Nova Scotia as well.
Oh, terrific.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great.
Anyway,
okay, John, I want to go back to the comment you were just making about trying things and experimenting. And I know one of the things that Rotary was piloting, and I don't know how that's going now with the shift in Chicago and Houston, was around the global membership.
Right.
And I also, when Director Jeffrey Catteritt was here earlier this year, he made a visit to the training session I mentioned to you. And he was using interesting language. He talked about participants more so than members. He was talking about, the idea of global membership and really looking at that value proposition in a way that allows us to think about how language is important with words like members and clubs and participants and Rotary. Separated them. Any thoughts on that, or what you've seen around the thinking with that kind of innovative use of language, I guess it is?
Well, yeah, let me answer first the language issue broadly, and then I'll get into in terms of the sort of different models that we're looking at. I think language is very important, and not just language in terms of what you just talked about, Lisa, but just in general. For us to really deal with some of the challenges we're facing, particularly here in North America, it's going to require long-term strategic focus. It's going to take 5-10 years of continuous, systematic, strategic effort. And as an organization, we're designed, by design, we're organized in a way to be unsystematic. Every year our club presidents change, every year our district governors change, every year half the Rotary International Board changes, our Rotary International President changes. And that's, there were good reasons for that, and that system has served us well. But it does have one disadvantage, is it makes continuity and that strategic focus very, very, very difficult. And so one of the things we're really trying to urge is that, clubs, districts begin, the president-elect, the nominee, the designate, the current, the leadership chain work as one united team within the framework of a well thought out strategic plan, so that, when you become club president or district governor or whatever, you're just picking up the baton from your predecessor and executing what the strategic plan calls for in that year. And so some of the language change I think we need to start talking about, I would ban the use of words of my year, my club presidents, my theme, my administration, my year, all that sort of stuff, because it takes us, in my view, backwards. It's not forward leaning, it's not strategic. So to your point about language, it is important. And I think we need to be very conscious of that and begin changing that as well. Now, in terms of our strategic plan, the Rotary International Strategic Plan has 4 sort of key directions or pillars. I know Tom Thorson will be talking to you next week. He doesn't like me to use the word pillars, but one of them is to try to increase the channels into Rotary that does not involve necessarily joining a Rotary club. And so when we talk about participants, we have a huge Rotary family, with Rotaract, Interact, RILA, Youth Exchange, our RAGs, our fellowships, you name it. I mean, it's a broad swath of people who have touched Rotary, but in ways that doesn't involve joining a Rotary club. So we are piloting in Houston and in Chicago, as you mentioned, a platform that will allow people to join that platform, not to join a Rotary club, but join Rotary as individuals. And then the goal there is to really facilitate mentorship and professional development and networking. But the idea here is that perhaps we create some sort of a global membership model where you become a member of Rotary International rather than a club. And then the question there, of course, is what's the value proposition? Why would somebody pay whatever it is, X number of dollars per year to be a global member, a global participant, rather than joining a Rotary club versus giving that money to another nonprofit or something else? So the value, it always comes back to the value proposition. But that's, again, an example of how we need to begin thinking and sort of expanding the ways in which people can participate in Rotary that doesn't involve necessarily joining a club.
Right, right. Well, it's interesting. We had many conversations as we were looking at the design for all of those 45 banners that I showed you at the beginning.
Right.
And in fact, none of them have the word club on them. They have the name and the Rotary group that they represent for sure. But the idea was to start to think about how can you engage people and how can people be participants in all of your activities in new ways. So
Right.
it's been an interesting conversation, but no question our clubs are the foundation of what we do, and it comes from them. But you might remember way back that you met my Rotarier dog. I didn't show that picture today. And my Rotarier is part of the thinking this year around trying to get it away, get the conversation away from my year, that it isn't about that, and there is that different way of thinking. And you used a great Canadian reference with our famous hockey player, of course, thinking about where the puck is going. And one of Wayne's comments was, you don't look at where the puck is, you look at where the puck is going. And that's his skill and talent to be able to do that. So I think that's where we are, is trying to think about, oh, there's one of Beacon's puppies is also up on the screen there with Holly. Everybody had a puppy to tell stories, but the thinking around how do we plan, and what kind of advice would you have for the district and club leaders on this call and on Facebook who are trying to figure out where the heck is the puck going? How do we as people coming into these leadership roles and trying to have continuity and so on, how do we plan for where the puck is going? Right? That's the $1 million question. But what do you think?
Well, I think, listen, I think that there is data out there that, what it depends on what are you trying to achieve? What's the goal that you're trying to achieve? Is it growing membership for the sake of growing membership? Is that we want to attract a certain type of person? Are we interested in growing to increase fellowship? Or are we trying to, is our goal to do community services, a little bit of both? So I think you need to sort of figure out where do you want to get to? What's the goal? What goal? What are you trying to achieve? And then, take a, and again, this is going to vary from club to club and district to district. What's, okay, how do we get there? But that's going to require, in my view, in some ways, whiteboarding. We've been at this for 115 years, and we've been wildly successful. There's a track record speaks for itself, but I think it does behoove every organization every 115 years or so to step back and say, okay, let's sort of whiteboard this thing and think through this thing. And so it's a matter of understanding what your marketplace is interested in, the demographic that you're trying to target, and then fashioning a product that they find attractive. And again, we do have a lot of circles we're trying to square, because the reality of somebody that's just starting out in their career and juggling family and mortgages and working your way up the career ladder, and someone who's retired and has the energy, the time, and the money to be they're in sort of different spaces. And so how do we fashion a product that is attractive to not only those two bookends I talked about, but everybody in between? And that's not easy to do. So maybe in some cases you say, listen, we're really going to try to become we have an organization in the United States called AARP. We're going to try to become the ARP of service. We're not even going to, and we've got a huge pool of baby boomers that are retiring, who have got the money, the time, the energy to do good in the world. That's what we're going to focus on. And we're going to try to, and the New York Times had, in fact, an article that we were featured in about how, organizations such as Rotary are a perfect fit for this older demographic, of which I'm now part of, that's, going to be retiring or is retired. And we have a really neat product for that person. So it's really there's no one size fits all, and there can't be, because what works in your part of Canada may not work in Japan and may not work in South Africa. So it really does come down to what the local conditions and needs are.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I would hope, you said we need to revisit every 115 years or so. I hope we do it. I hope we do it more often. But yeah, I think that's a really good point, that we have looked the same for a significant part of that 115 years. I'm just going to remind everybody to be putting questions in the chat line. We're going to come to that in just a moment. So please put your questions in, and Holly will call upon you if you have questions for John in a couple of minutes. But I'm going to come back to that, because I think that highlights one of the key challenges, is that we do try to be all things to all people within one club. And so we want to respect the ritual and the traditions of those that have been there, possibly charter members or early founding members. And we want to attract these mythical young professionals to come as well. And it's really challenging to serve all people. And so maybe this is an opportunity to look at different kinds of clubs and to recognize that maybe having another group in your geographic area is not such a problem, that it can serve different needs, or could be cause-based or focused on a different value proposition. Can you speak to that? Because I know that's a challenge when we talk about, oh, let's look at a passport club in a certain area. Oh, we already have a club there. But it can't be all things to all people. So, you know, what's your thought around that?
Yeah, exactly what you said. Again, let me just be clear. I love tradition. I'm not. If as I said, if the traditional club model is attractive to the members and it's working, and your club is growing and it's having impact, and you're achieving with the club what you want to achieve, then by all means. But I do think in today's world, it is increasingly difficult to provide a one size fits all and a product that's attractive to everyone. And so it's, if your club, you know, is thriving and doing well, but you're not able to attract a certain demographic, then why not create a club designed to perhaps operate in a different way and is going to be attractive to a different segment that your particular club wasn't able to attract? You know, that's not wrong that your club wasn't able to attract that, but it certainly, I think, is not helpful for the organization or for our goal of doing good in the world to hold back the development of clubs in a because we already have a club. Yeah, unless that club's booming and growing and, you know, going gangbusters, that it seems to me that's probably not a prudent way to go. Why not? What's the downside? They're not joining your club anyhow, and probably won't. And that's fine. It's not that your club is bad. It's actually quite good for the members and that demographic that you're trying to attract. Why not set up a different one? In fact, you know, one of the challenges we're facing globally, and it's just a slight digression, so I wanted to make sure I mentioned this, is that, you know, we're only capturing 5% of Rotaractors worldwide to become Rotarians. And that is a tragedy. And again, Rotaract is different in different parts of the world, and in some parts of the world, in Europe, for example, they're very much community-based. In North America, they tend to be university-based, which is, you know, more difficult in terms of maintaining continuity and vibrancy. But, you know, to lose 95% of our Rotaractors who don't become Rotarians is in my view a tragedy. These are young men and women who are passionate about Rotary, our ideals, our values, and we've spectacularly failed in transitioning them over to Rotarians. And so I think one of the perhaps opportunities of this new virtual reality that we're in is that we can become closer to our Rotaractors. They live in this space, they know this space, they're creative as heck, and they can be extraordinarily creative and helpful to us certainly me, the less technologically proficient end of the spectrum, to really help us think through some of this creativity in terms of how are we going to operate in this new virtual reality. And so let's take advantage of this moment and really bring ourselves closer to the Rotaractors. Another opportunity, and then think through how we going to facilitate that glide path for them to become Rotarians.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. That I think it comes back again to that value proposition idea that we perhaps haven't really thought about that enough. The other opportunity that we might have is in areas where we have some really small clubs, and I think every district has clubs that are, you know, below 20, below 15, maybe even one or two that are below, you know, 10 active members that are really challenged to be as engaged. They do great work, no question, they do great work, but it's tough to grow and tough to have the engagement. And maybe this is an opportunity to look at some different models for clubs in an area to collaborate in a new way. I'm thinking about, you know, not merger necessarily, but coming together in new kinds of collaborations with different could be committees or teams that focus on certain areas or certain little geographic pieces. Have you seen any kind of creative things with that?
Well, I think, you know, the issue of small clubs is one that I think we need to look at. And as you said, small clubs, many of them punch way above their weight, do terrific work, and add real value to the to the community. But there are pockets in the world where you've just got districts with a huge number of small clubs, and certainly in those areas it would be much more effective to have clubs coming together, merging, creating economies of scale. One of the shifts in the way in which we've been handling grants, for example, from Rotary Foundation is with the new grant model that went into effect in 2013. Well, it's no longer that new, but is really to take a shift away from doing kind of smaller projects that don't have that great an impact and certainly aren't scalable, to really encouraging clubs and districts to do projects that are larger, more scalable, more impactful. And that helps on a number of levels. One, we get more bang for the buck, right? I mean, the world is littered with water projects where you come into a village and you put in a borehole, and you come back a year later and the thing's not working because it wasn't the technology that was appropriate for the community. They didn't have the money to maintain it, and even if they did, they didn't have access to spare parts. And so this focus on sustainability, needs assessment, looking at what the community actually needs and wants, and ensuring that our project continues on even after Rotary support ends is a really important concept. And so for a number of reasons. One, you want to make sure you're getting good bang for your buck. Secondly, I think it helps our public image. I mean, if we're doing projects that are larger, more scalable, more impactful, that helps clearly with our public image. And of course, the better our public image, the more members we can attract. The more members, the more potential donors, the more money for the foundation. And it becomes a positively reinforcing a continuous circle. And finally, we need to make ourselves also, as an organization globally, more attractive to outside funding sources. As our membership has sort of stayed flat, and again, our fundraising and the generosity of Rotarians has continued to increase, which is extraordinarily good to see. But we're also going to need to make ourselves attractive to outside funding sources, because we have the ability to deliver projects, but we may not necessarily at some point have the financing. And polio is a classic example. We have a world-class product to sell, and that's polio, and we've been getting hundreds of millions of dollars from the Gates Foundation for our world-class product. We don't have another world-class product, at least at a global level, out there. And we will sort of, and as we think about what the next project is after polio, we need to begin thinking in those terms. So I think if we can start at the club and district level and really get into this mentality of doing things that are larger, more scalable, more impactful, that starts rippling through the organization. And I think that's quite a good thing. And so perhaps you start by having smaller clubs team up together to do larger projects. That then creates the bonds, the doing something together, and then that could perhaps facilitate then in the future merging, if that's the goal that people want to get to. Doing things together breaks down a lot of barriers, doing things together successfully.
Exactly. Well, we actually have one area where the clubs have a joint international services committee where they collaborate. The money goes in a pot together, which is wonderful. Holly, I'm going to ask you to bring one of our questions forward at this point. If you want to pick the first one that came in.
Okay, the first one is Duncan Conrad. Go ahead, Duncan.
Hi, John. Nice to see you.
Yeah, good to see you.
John, as you know, I've been serving on the Constitution and Bylaws Committee, and actually have the pleasure of serving as the incoming chair for the next year. Just want to give a big shout out to Sarah and Maureen for the great work that they do, making my job a lot easier, especially during these virtual times.
Right.
But John, the question I have is around the whole issue of the tax exempt status that the COL voted on last year, the change from the 501(4)(c) to the 501(3)(c). And just wondering if you can comment on where we are with that.
Yeah, perhaps I can just give the group a little bit of context, and because it's somewhat of a technical answer. Currently, Rotary has two legal entities. We have Rotary International, which is the umbrella organization for our 36,000 clubs. And we have the Rotary Foundation, which is the vehicle we use to raise funds and then issue, at least to US donors, a tax receipt. The Rotary International is organized as what we call in the US a 501(c)(4) organization. And Rotary Foundation is organized as a 501(c)(3) organization. we took a look at some of the benefits of turning Rotary International from a C4 into a C3, and that being you get significant discounts on software, for example, from providers on cost of software. We're going to be moving our international assembly from San Diego to Orlando. Well, in the state of Florida, if you're a C3, you get certain tax benefits from sales tax, et cetera. And so the last council, as Duncan correctly mentioned, the last council authorized Rotary International to convert itself from a C4 to a C3 organization. That will have no impact on Rotarians outside of North America. In fact, it will have no impact on Rotarians generally. It's really designed to provide additional tax and other benefits to Rotary National, significant savings. However, in order to convert Rotary International into this new form, into a C3, we need to ensure that the US clubs continue to enjoy the C4 exemption that they're given. In other words, currently, Rotary International is a C4. By extension, we were able to get a group exemption so that all of our clubs in the US are also treated as C4 entities. They don't have to each go and apply for this status with the American Internal Revenue Service. However, once we move Rotary International from a C4 to a C3, we need to obtain assurance from the IRS that old blanket C4 exemption for our clubs continues. And that's the holdup right now. We've submitted paperwork to get that confirmation. We've not yet gotten it. As soon as we do, we then move forward with to convert Rotary from a C3 into a C4 into a C3. Sorry for that highly boring technical answer.
That was a learning moment. I think we'll call that an absolute learning experience. No, thank you for that. That was
bottom
great.
line is it will have no impact on certainly Rotarians in Canada. It's strictly a cost-saving measure at the international level.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks,
Holly,
Sean.
who's
Your next question is coming from Jillian Gibson.
Hi, good morning. This is you can answer this in a fairly quick way because I know there are a lot of other answers in the queue. I will be taking on the position of the District Rotary Foundation Chair for our district starting in July. Quick question is, will the market volatility that we are bound to be experiencing with the investments from the Rotary Foundation, will that have an impact on the amount that comes back to the district via DDF from our share program? Because we're now looking at some, we have that 3-year that we can look back to the giving 3 years ago to project what we're going to have this year for spending and next year and so on. Is there a possibility that that will be impacted by the market?
I think what would be impacted is the ability to, is the pressure on the World Fund and the amount that we would have available for global grants. And, again, we have a very sophisticated investment strategy. We actually have an internal chief investment officer now, and we brought all that sort of work in-house, and we've done a very good job of stratifying the risk in the various funds. For example, the endowment fund has kind of the riskiest portfolio. The annual fund, less so, because we obviously 3 years later we need to use it. The polio fund is the least risky because that's something we're in real time distributing and using. And so, yes, the investment returns will have an impact, no question about that. I think there'll be a greater impact on our ability to do global grants than the DDF coming back to the districts for your district grants.
Great, thanks.
Thanks, John. Holly.
Actually, I'm going to move Stella up at the moment. Stella, are you there still?
Yes, I am. Good morning, John. Thank you for being here. I'm an End Polio Now coordinator. And I just have a question. I realize that I'm told that we're $16 million short for the $50 million that we have to raise for the Bill and Melinda Gates match. And I'm always unsure whether we actually have to raise the 50 million or if we raise 34 million, which we have right now, will we get some match for the 34 million or do we have to get 50 million? And if it is 50 million, do you think we'll be able to negotiate that in these really unprecedented times?
Yeah. Well, yeah, first of all, just on polio, the Gates Agreement stays in force. I know there had been some media reports about, a shift in focus by the Gates Foundation just to COVID. The agreement is in place, And the agreement is really, they'll match us 2 to 1 for every dollar we raise and spend on polio in a calendar year. So up to 50 million. So if we raise 10, we'll get a 20 million match. If we raise 50, we'll get 100 million match.
Perfect.
So,
Thank you.
but the message here is on polio, just briefly for the group, the GPI, the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, has suspended the door-to-door vaccination campaigns, obviously because of the social distancing norms that are in place. However, the surveillance work and the other related work to polio that doesn't involve door-to-door vaccination continues. And the polio infrastructure is being redeployed now, where appropriate, to support COVID activities. Very similar to what happened in West Africa when the Ebola crisis hit. If you recall, the polio infrastructure was very successfully deployed, particularly in Nigeria, our emergency operations centers, to stop the spread of Ebola in Nigeria. But having said that, Stella, we need to continue to raise money. I mean, we want to get to that 50 million so we can maximize that $100 million match. So my request to you and all Rotarians is, even though, we're in this difficult situation, we still need to continue to raise money for polio, because we will get through this and we still need to eradicate polio. And so we need to make sure we hit that 50 million this calendar year so that we can get that full 100 million match.
Okay. Thanks, John. Holly, maybe we do 2 more.
Okay, yep, Michael Craig, you're up next, and then Christina.
Okay, those will be the final 2, I think.
Hi, John. So I'm the Rotary Youth Exchange Chair for our district, and my question has to do with Rotary Youth Exchange. I understand at the June RI board meeting, there's going to be a risk assessment report presented.
Right.
Thus far, the direction from RI on how to proceed with Youth Exchange at this time has been really good. So I'm looking forward to getting some more. But I'm just wondering if there's any possibility that RI might shut the Youth Exchange program down globally for the upcoming year. And that's, of course, a general concern for us and our students, and trying to arrange even second semester exchanges. But in our district, we're also doing a special exchange with a student from Venezuela. And it's a little bit unusual terms, I won't get into all that. But I wouldn't want some of those less typical arrangements. I wouldn't want any of them to get interrupted if we can pull them off, but I especially wouldn't want some of those more unusual arrangements to inadvertently get squashed. So I'm just wondering what the thought process is about that risk assessment, and whether we'll be running or facing a shutdown of RI of the Youth Exchange program next year.
No, thank you, Michael. It's a great question. I don't know. I don't have the answer for it right now. As you said, we're doing a risk assessment. And that assessment will look at all options from shutting down to doing nothing, and what's the risk profile for each one. And what I can tell you is it's not going to be an easy discussion, because as you just indicated, it's let's say we were to, and I'm not saying we will, but let's say we were hypothetically to close it down for a year. Well, obviously that's we're shutting down one of our more valuable, impactful programs. And then what's that mean if you don't do it for a year or 2? Well, that sort of gradually mean the end of the program, et cetera. So it's kind of a high stakes game, and it's going to require a lot of thought and analysis. So I don't want to prejudge what the decision is going to be. We're involved, as you said, in a very thoughtful risk assessment right now, and that'll be presented to the board at the June meeting, and we'll see how it shakes out. I can't give you a clear answer right now, other than we're going to try to do it thoughtfully, methodically, and do at the end of the day what we think is best for the students and for the Rotarians and for the program. Because obviously we all want the program to continue when we come out of this crisis, to have the program continue to be viable, strong. I think it's one of the great things that Rotary does, frankly. In fact, I have the privilege of representing Rotary at a lot of international events, Davos and other things like that. And I can't tell you how many times I have run into ministers, heads of state, Fortune 500, Fortune 100 CEOs who say, "Oh, Rotary, oh, you're with Rotary." Yeah, I was a Rotary Youth Exchange student. I spent a year in Chile when I was in high school, and it changed my life. I am who I am today thanks to Rotary. And I'm beaming, I'm all like, "Oh, this is awesome." And then I have the follow-up question, which is a bit of a downer. In almost all cases, I said, "So Do you have any idea what Rotary's been up to? Nope. You stayed in touch with Rotary? Nope. Are you a Rotarian? Nope. But I do know it changed my life, and I am who I am today thanks to that Rotary Youth Exchange I had. So it brings me back to that earlier point I made, that we have this enormous alumni network out there. In addition to the Rotaractors, who we're not doing a good job of cultivating and transitioning to Rotarians, we've got this extraordinary alumni network out there, people who've been touched by Rotary profoundly, and yet we've lost touch with them. And so we're now making, from an RI perspective, we're really trying to get our handle around getting the database sorted out, getting a grip on who exactly our alumni are, and begin more aggressive outreach work, because that's a huge pool of potential donors, Rotarians, friends of Rotary, that we've kind of neglected through the years,
Maybe we just do a quick
Thanks.
one, Christina.
I was going to give my last little bit of lobbying in, and that is, to the extent that you do end up doing something dramatic like a shutdown, if you can remove the prohibition on doing exchanges outside of youth exchange, or at least leave us some sort of wiggle room to still continue with the programs that we would judge to be critical.
Yeah, again, Mike, I suspect the thought process will be, let as much continue to happen as safely as possible, right?
Yeah.
That's the sweet spot, right? It's trying to find,
Yes.
but I just don't want to prejudge the answer at this point.
No, couldn't miss the chance to lobby. Thank you.
Yeah, sure, no, thank you. Thanks for
Michael.
all that you do for that program.
Michael does amazing work with that. Let's do a quick last one from Christina, and then let John give us his final tips. Holly?
Okay, I will be super quick. So I am one of those mythical creatures that Louisa talks about that left Rotaract and joined Rotary. Here in St. John's, we have a unique situation where we have 5 of the local clubs who sponsor our Rotaract club here in the city. Probably about 6 years ago now, we officially changed the charter of the club from a university-based club to a community club, but we haven't actually successfully been able to make that transition off campus. And I'm wondering if you have any tips on for Rotaract clubs who successfully made that transition from a university-based club to a community club.
Well, I think a lot of the success is that when they graduated from university, they've stayed in the area. And I think the challenge is, at least in a lot of parts, is people graduate and they move on, and certainly in North America, you tend to you grow up in one place, do university in another place, and wind up working in the third place, which in other countries it's less so. So I think it's really a function of having the luck in some way of enough of your core members continuing in that region, in that area, and then just creating a club that begin recruiting members that are also living there, and creating that community. I don't have a magic bullet for you, Christina, other than I applaud you for trying to make the transition, and that's where I think the Rotary clubs really could be helpful in terms of supporting you, etc. But I don't have a magic bullet. It really does come down to, I'm not trying to dodge the question. It's just, what's your local reality? What are the local conditions? What's possible within what's the reality that you have? But I do think that we need to do a much better job of bringing Rotaract and Rotary clubs closer together. We've had obviously changes in the formal legislation where you can be a Rotaractor and Rotarian at the same time, where Rotaract clubs can now sponsor other Rotaract clubs. In fact, a Rotaract club can be created without a Rotary club sponsor. To the extent Rotaract club has a Rotary club sponsor, that continues, that doesn't end. But Rotaract clubs can now be chartered without a formal Rotary club sponsor. And Rotaract and Rotary clubs can co-sponsor Interact clubs. So there's a lot of creative new ways, or not a new, at least from a legislative perspective, where the Rotaract and Rotary clubs can interact together more formally.
Comes back to that value proposition, but it's a great thought. By the way, Christina is our youngest board member on our district board and chairs our public image committee. So we were very happy to have her voice at the table. We've gone a little bit longer than we intended to, John, because you've had such great value to bring to us. So I'm going to give you the opportunity to give your key points that you wanted to leave.
I just want to leave you with 5 points and then with one sort of closing wrap-up thought. First is that, we talked a lot about in this call about member retention and value proposition and keeping our membership base strong and vibrant, and to make sure we make it through this crisis as strong as we were going into it. And again, our analysis globally, and I know you're doing a lot of that at the local level, and it may be different or maybe the same, but at least from a global level, when we look at the data and we see when do members leave, what's the timing on leaving our organization? We find it's quite clear. The longer one is a Rotarian, the less likely it is that person will leave the organization. And the real danger where we see at least at a global level, where people leave the organization is in the second and third year of their membership. That's the danger spot. So as we focus on maintaining the strength and vibrancy of our organization and retaining our members and engaging our members, that's the really most vulnerable, for lack of a better word, part of our Rotarian population are the newer members. And so I would urge you, my first call to action is really let's focus and make sure our newer members are fully engaged and looked after in this difficult time. Second is, projects. Our projects are by and large, in many cases, require a physical presence. We work together, get together, do something. Well, that's no longer possible. And so my second call to action is we really need to put on our creative thinking caps. And I don't have the magic answer, but I suspect 1.2 million Rotarians, if we really put our minds to it, we'll be able to come up with new creative ways of doing our projects in this virtual space, which is not going to be clearly easy. So that's the second call. The third has to do with fundraising. Same issue. Most of our fundraising activities require, us to get together. Pancake days, walkathons, bike rides, $1 million dinners, you name it, right? And that's not possible now. And so what are the other ideas out there? The next ALS Ice Bucket Challenge that we can come up with, or the next virtual Oktoberfest we can come up with to continue to raise funds, because we, obviously more than ever, we need to get, the world needs Rotary, and we need to continue with our fundraising efforts. That's the third call. We really need to be creative and then share that creativity among ourselves so that we can learn from each other and continue to raise money. Fourth is, a lot of anecdotes about clubs are more engaged than ever, and that's true. A lot of clubs, look at this meeting here. We got 43 people on, cost is zero, easy to do. I was on a call 2 nights ago, 1,700 Brazilians. And then earlier in the day with 500 of our Rotarians from Turkey. And earlier in the day before that with 350 from the Caribbean. We're now in some ways much more connected than ever. But I suspect there are also clubs that aren't meeting and are not embracing the technology or haven't figured out how to do it yet. And if a club goes 3-4 months without meeting, it's dead. They're not going to come out of this thing intact. And so my fourth call to action is let's really identify and focus on those clubs in our towns, in our districts, et cetera, that are struggling, that are having trouble meeting. Make sure that they continue to be engaged. Let's give them a hand. Make sure they can continue to meet, because that member engagement at this critical juncture, clubs need to continue to meet and do stuff. It's going to be critical to come out of this thing as strong as we were going into it. And then finally, the sky is not falling. We're organizationally, operationally very sound, and financially, Rotary International and the foundation are sound. The world, there's skies falling in part, outside of the Rotary context, but within our narrow context, the sky's not falling. To the contrary, in my view, this is an extraordinary opportunity to really be creative and take our organization to the next level. So let me just close on one last parting word. The world needs Rotary now more than ever. In fact, if you think about it, Rotary was built for moments like this. Rotary was built for moments like this. An unmatched platform, global platform. We have deep community roots in almost every community in the world. I like to say there's not a politician in the world who doesn't have a Rotarian as a constituent. So I like to just close with the word of Herb Brooks. I love hockey. I'm sorry, I'm a Red Wing fan. Grew up in Detroit. Don't care for the Leafs. I shouldn't say that publicly, but we can't grow up in Detroit. But I love hockey, And I just remember that, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm sure here, that Herb Brooks in the locker room before the US team went out to play the Soviets in 1980 in Lake Placid. This is our moment. And I believe that's true for Rotary as well. This is our moment. We were built for this moment. It's our destiny in a way. This is Rotary's moment in history to continue not only to do what we've been doing, but to do so much more because we were built for this moment. So I want to just thank you all for having me. And I know we've run a little bit over, Luis, I apologize, but really enjoyed. Thank you for your great questions. And again, we're here in Evanston to support you. Let us know what we can do to help you in these really, really difficult times. But thanks for having me.
Well, thank you, John. It's been wonderful. And yes, we have gone over, we sometimes end with a little game, and we're skipping that obviously today because you brought such value to us, and your comments, I know will go much farther. We have folks on Facebook as well. And of course, this will now be shared with all of our clubs. So even though we don't have huge numbers here, it will touch a lot of people. And we thank you very much.